I wanted to kind of bring it back to you guys here because one of the talking points is that this was an insurrection. These were terrorists. They planned the coup d'etat. We have John Bolton, the man who knows almost everything about a coup d'etat because he orchestrated them in the third world, coming out and saying this was definitely a coup d'etat. From your experience, was this a professional coup d'etat attempt even?
Well, I mean, what I saw going into the Capitol were some people who were intent on breaking things, but mostly a lot of just kind of bewildered people who were kind of bumbling about and kind of taking in the novelty of it. And when I arrived in the rotunda, there were probably about 80 people in there, and a lot of them were just milling around and taking selfies, and it didn't seem like they were, trying to run around and smash anything. I think really what happens in these kind of situations is once the chaos starts, once a couple of people break through that line, once a couple of people start pushing up on the cops, then it doesn't take much for other people to follow suit.
So let's just start from the beginning, and let's hear your guys' story. What happened?
Well, we'll start off with, actually,
you can start off in the morning because you were there. And
So I got there around 8 in the morning, and as soon as I arrived at the Washington Monument, it was just like a sea of people, flags everywhere.
How many do you think?
I mean, from my perspective, I think minimum over 500,000 people.
I would say in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, we've heard that.
I was there for Obama's first inauguration and second and Trump's, and it was not quite the same numbers as any of those, but it was close.
500,000.
Yeah,
it was a lot.
Let's not forget.
You said 500,000?
I think it was
because we've heard 200
for sure.
Because the Women's March, they said it was around there, and I looked at the photos, the aerials and stuff. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands. Let's say that it's definitely more than tens of thousands, I think.
So what happens? What happens?
Let's also.
So my understanding is that Trump got on stage and said, everybody stand at attention, and said your orders are as such, go and destroy, and then he started passing out torches, right?
Yeah.
Like Trump directed all of them, right?
Like I said, I got there.
I'm kidding, by the way.
Yeah, I know. But when I even getting there, like I said, I got it there at 8 in the morning. It was a sea of people. It went all the way back to like the Washington Monument. When Trump, I think, took the stage around noon, and he spoke for about 45 minutes. Now, where I was at, you couldn't even like hear him. So like the people were just there to like kind of be there. But even during his speech, people already started going to the Capitol building. So like from where I was at, you couldn't hear anything. But like I said, it seemed like a normal day.
I was watching Trump's speech, and it was before anybody could have even left the ellipse. People were already at the gates of the Capitol. So like Trump and the people who were there. So I knew people who were down there, and I was asking them. I was like, "Are you anywhere near the Capitol?" They're like, "No, I'm at the rally. Trump's giving a speech." I'm like, but there are people at the Capitol building right now who were like, So anyway, continue. What happened?
No, but basically, yeah. So I was more in the back section. But even during Trump's speech, like I said, you already see people flowing in and heading towards the Capitol building. So I did my interviews. Then I thought it was gonna be a regular day. So for me, I was like, you know what? This is my chance to like go get some McDonald's and like just kind of like recharge, be back at like 5 for the action. So when I went to go do that. That's when I got the news of basically the breach happened, and I think
that's literally right as I was heading down.
And I think Richie then took off.
I actually had a friend who worked at the Capitol, and they were up on the roof, and they said they saw cops running around, and I was like, that's weird. I should probably get down there. So I went down there, and I brought all my gear because I didn't suspect that things were going to get bad, but I wanted to be ready if they did. And the moment I arrived, I mean, you can see the clips, my first clips on my thread on Twitter. It was basically they were already clashing, and I went up in that tower, that scaffolding, and you can see that view as the lines are broken. Basically, it's the same thing. 2 or 3 guys make it through. They get clubbed. They get knocked down. Brutality. Everyone gets even more mad, and then a couple more break through, and then the police are overwhelmed. And if you see the numbers, I mean, it's not a matter. I think that the instances that have been cited online of cops, letting up or whatever, I don't even think it was a matter of that, because even where I was, where the cops were giving it their 1,000, I mean, you can see on the video, these cops were trying their best to hold on to these barriers, to hold the line, but they were getting pepper sprayed themselves, and I saw a number of them injured and going back and getting medical attention. So I think they would have been overwhelmed no matter what, given the chaos that was unfolding.
So so what happens? You're standing up on the scaffold, you see the line break. What happens next?
So I see the line break, and as the line is breaking, I have to give a shout out. It was my mom's birthday, and I called her in the morning. I'm not that bad a son, but she called me as the line was breaking, and like on an iPhone, if you ignore the call, it ends the video. So then If you look on Twitter, my video is broken up into 3 parts because my mom called me a second time and I declined again. And she forgave me for ignoring her call on her birthday. So thank you, Mom. I appreciate that. But after that, by that point, the police were concentrating themselves kind of in that open area on the stairs, but people were already climbing up the scaffoldings and into an area where they could still access the Capitol.
So they were past the cops.
So actually the scaffoldings made it more difficult for the cops to defend that area surrounding, because basically there were, like little nooks and crannies where people could climb into those scaffoldings, climb up and get up on the bleachers.
So then what happens? Like when did people get in? Take us through how you ended up in there.
From up there, I could see basically the flow of people going up the stairs. A lot of them just stopped and decided to wave a Trump flag or, wave whatever flag they had. I caught video of one guy who got a fire extinguisher from somewhere and was spraying it down on the cops below him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So when did they go inside? Like,
so that was right around that time that the lines broke. And it took me about 10 minutes before I realized, there are a ton of people going in there. And I have congressional press credentials, so I was like, I'm going in. I'm going to see what's going on there.
That's how you were up there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, no. So I actually I had come down so quickly that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I wasn't up there in the first place, but by the time I got in there, I saw a bunch of people in the rotunda. But then to my left, I saw some protesters kind of rushing down the hall through Statuary Hall towards the House floor. So I went through Statuary Hall, and there was already evidence of some riot control munitions being used. You can see the pepper on the ground, and also the orange tinge of pepper spray.
Yeah.
It has a unique color, depending on which brand it is. But so I proceeded down that hallway, and I actually saw a group of protesters surrounding the house doors, and there were 8 or 9 of them. You can see it on my video right as I arrive. And actually some of them are shouting "You killed her, you killed someone, you killed someone." And so they were already somehow aware. I think that was just immediately after the shooting had taken place. And one of them had wedged himself right in that door. And I think that's the photo that you see with the police with their guns drawn.
Right.
That guy with his face right there. Because there were only 2 or 3 police at the time. They were actually outnumbered right in front of the doors. And they were trying to pry him off. But because they were outnumbered, they were basically waiting for reinforcements. And it took about 5 to 10 minutes of kind of a little standoff before 6 or 7 more cops showed up and then removed them, and we were pushed back out into through Statuary Hall and into.
There's a clip where you're saying you can't breathe, and there's a cop saying he can't breathe. Yeah. What happened with that?
Okay, so that was after we were pushed through Statuary Hall. We were back into the Capitol Rotunda, which is the big underneath the big dome. That's the biggest room there, and there were still maybe 100 people in there. The cops started to push us out, but there's kind of maybe only a 20-foot wide doorway there, and so. What happened was all the protesters got bottlenecked there. They were pushing back. And then there were maybe 40 or 50 cops at the time pushing against us. So I was, as a reporter, it's valuable to be in the middle of the protesters and the cops so you can kind of show both sides. So I was stuck in between, and I literally had, you can hear on the video, the cop had his billy club on my stomach. And I was like, can you just take it off my tummy? Please,
my tummy?
Put it up here. Oh, well, I don't know why I said that. But I think it was easier for me to say tummy than stomach.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just take it off my tummy.
That sucks.
But you could hear another individual.
You never know
pleading.
how you act in a crisis. People think they know how to respond.
You don't.
Sometimes you blurt out tummy.
But it felt a lot better once he got it up on my vest.
Why was he doing it? He was holding you back or what?
So he was pushing against me to try to push the protesters back, but there were probably 30 protesters behind me pushing against me. Jeez. So I literally was just, I was telling the officers, there's nothing I can do. And he was being pushed behind by his own officers. So
this is why you shouldn't go in between.
Yeah.
I understand what you mean, but you're trying to stand, not necessarily in between, but off, but still sort of so you can see both groups and what they're doing. Because if you're behind the protesters, you won't see what they're doing.
Exactly.
And if you're behind the cops, you don't see what the cops are doing. You got to get that angle. It's tough. And then you end up getting jammed.
It was 20 minutes stuck in there as just pushing back and forth.
Wow. But then they broke through or what?
They eventually pushed the protesters all out.
Oh, okay. They cleared it out.
Yeah. And then there was another scuffle by the door to the exit, which had also been smashed, and they were trying to close, but the protesters were blocking that. And so that was kind of the last final push, and I got tossed into the door. But
you have breaking news?
This is pretty big news by an AP reporter named Mike Balsamo, who says, quote, U.S. Capitol Police say reports that an officer has died are not true. Although some officers were injured and hospitalized yesterday, no U.S. CP officers have passed away. This is, again, according to Mike Balsalmo, who is an AP reporter that just broke this story a couple of minutes ago. And I didn't want to interrupt you.
No.
Here's the challenge for us here, as with anything pertaining to news. I've got 800 plus sources saying an officer died of being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, and we have one guy saying it's not true. So who do you trust?
I actually know Mike. He does great work.
Right, he does.
I trust him. I do.
Okay. So. I do too. He did. I can't remember what he covered some big event.
He did. What Mike did was really cool. Was during the Portland riots, he got inside access with federal officers. Yeah. So he actually got to be in the line with them, and he got to actually interview and tell their story. So yeah, I think I'll trust Mike on that one. But at the same time, we'll see.
We'll have to wait for things to kind of. I mean, look, it's really fascinating that. I mean, we've got, K-Ron 4, we got CNN, we got a bunch of sources saying this officer died. Now he's coming out saying the Capitol Police are denying that. It makes sense. Sometimes, what happens is that CNN will get a story and then everyone will copy CNN and cite them. Yeah. And then someone goes for a comment and goes, whoa, you got to stop.
Well, Tim, actually, speaking of the AP, Mike, I got there a little bit after, I guess, the crowd has already been cleared out at the U.S. Capitol, so it was between 4:35. And as soon as I got there were still hundreds of folks at the U.S. Capitol, and there was a lot of rage going on, and so I got on the ground, and the AP was actually there still reporting. They had a couple cameras. Believe they had about 4 cameras, tripods, the whole thing, and the whole crowd just starts turning on them, attacking them,
smashing their cameras. Right?
Yeah. Then they took down the barricades, and then in my video you could see one man with an American flagpole just trying to hit them and then smack the cameras down. And then eventually the crowd just destroys the whole equipment. And so I took that footage and then I uploaded on Twitter. Then the response online is, folks were just like cheering it on. And
it's mob mentality.
That's why we use our cell phones.
And look, and I get it. There's a lot of anger with the mainstream media, but I think for me as a takeaway as a reporter was, and maybe Richie, if you have some thoughts on this, is like during the summer when we filmed press getting attacked from Black Lives Matter activists and we put that online, that same crowd would say, hey, these are the anti-fascists. They're against, the First Amendment. They're against freedom of press.
Yep.
But when it's their side, it was totally acceptable.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it goes back to what you were talking about with the small businesses earlier, which is, over the summer, what we saw were a lot of really people who felt like they'd been sold down the river, and they were angry about it. And that anger was aimed towards a system that was enforced by police. And so the argument of BLM and Antifa is always, they enforce a corrupt system, therefore all cops are bastards. So we saw that turn happen, not this last rally, but the one before, where all the Proud Boys were basically saying, you guys are enforcing this system that's stealing our election, therefore you guys are terrible.
But we started seeing the sentiment against police when the cops were enforcing the COVID lockdowns. And some of them were perceived as arbitrary by locals, notably in Staten Island, where you had this one bar that decided to open up in defiance of the lockdown, but 2 blocks away, there's a restaurant with full, just operating like normal. And so the locals get angry and they say, what's this all about? Why are we locked down and they're not? And they say, well, you're on the border of the red zone. So when the police come out and block the door, people in Staten Island, Trump supporters, come out with Trump flags, surprisingly thin blue line flags, yelling at the cops. And then it escalated when we actually saw the conservatives take the thin blue line flag, throw it on the ground, stomp on it, and then throw it in the street. And then I think, now you got conservatives saying it's the birth of right-wing Antifa.
Well, it's important to point out in Staten Island, the zone that was restricted the most was a Republican area that many people said that the local Democratic government was selectively choosing to enforce these rules on.
Well, they were also targeting the Jewish areas, which is really weird.
Yeah, really the Hasidic Jewish community, and we talked about that extensively on this show, and even had Heshi on the show, who's still out there and going to many rallies and doing a lot of different stuff.
Trouble.
I actually made my way up there and covered a story with the Hasidic Jew community where they just defied the lockdown orders and kind of partied out in the streets.
Burned some masks.
Yeah.
Well, one of the crazy things too, I guess, is just people. There's a lot of commentary on the wrong target, I guess. They're saying, why are you going to the Capitol building? They're doing this, I guess you call it pro forma or ceremonial electoral, count. And it didn't matter if it was shut down or not. It doesn't matter if you're in the Capitol. Where's the actual organization and the protests of these actual corrupt institutions? I get it. They view the Capitol and Congress as corrupt in a lot of ways. But what about the media? And what about, more importantly, organizing and planning so that what you do is effective in some capacity? Because now what we see here is already there's Joe Biden coming out numerous occasions now saying it was insurrection, domestic terrorism, and things like that. So, we had the Patriot Act. Now they're going to come out with the securing American freedoms. And
now we're seeing an argument to remove Trump from office with
impeachment, Amendment 25.
Yeah.
My question is I think if that had been a BLM march, then perhaps they would have had more guards. Who's in charge of that?
I honestly think
whose job is it to make sure that Capitol doesn't get attacked? It's Capitol Police, right? There's Park Police involved, Muriel Bowser, and the federal government. Who of those people fucked up? Messed up.
Fudged up. You meant to say.
No, it's the Capitol Police who's now resigned, I suppose. But I think the issue is, I think they screwed up. But more importantly, nobody thought Trump supporters were going to do this. Come on.
I had my helmet and my gas mask on.
Yeah, but I guess we've seen the escalation, like I mentioned, with cops and the Proud Boys fighting. But you look at Antifa and they're showing up, and they'd been burning, Antifa and Black Lives Matter have been burning things down for years. They're like, we better secure this. You get the ellipse full of a bunch of middle-aged and older Trump supporters waving little flags, and Trump giving a speech, and they were like, nah, it's gonna be fine. We don't got anything to worry about. And apparently they did.
The Proud Boys, the previous rally, they weren't just waving little flags. They were running through the streets shouting F Antifa and looking for fights.
Sure.
And they got the fights, for sure.
But to assume that the regular Trump supporters would bolster that, you know what I mean, would escalate.
I agree with that, but I don't think it takes very many in the group in order to create that kind of situation.
And I think, what some people have said is, I can't believe I'm seeing people that think it was a good strategy. I don't think it matters whether, I don't think that matters. You know what, man? When we see Cori Bush and AOC, they're calling for the expulsion of members of Congress who supported Trump. She directly said that Ted Cruz and Hawley should be expelled from Congress. It's like, okay, you're a congresswoman, they're senators. That's a very, it's a bit different, it's the upper chamber. But that's an insane and dangerous escalation. And it's going to keep happening. Nobody wants to back down. CNN doesn't. CNN is looking at their CPMs, on YouTube perhaps, but they're looking at their ad rates. And Jeff Zucker is cracking the champagne and saying, we got to keep this going somehow.
Hey, and let's not forget, there was just a month ago, there was reports of Jeff Zucker wanting to step down because of the Trump administration. So, for him, it was like, hey, I already rode what I could do. We already hit the highest ratings we can. This under the Biden administration, it's going to be, lame duck media. So there was already reports of Jeff Zucker trying to step down, but with this, you might want to stay in business for a little bit.
Someone today took Chris Cuomo's comments a few months ago, where he said protests are not supposed to be peaceful. They took the full segment, and instead of doing the B-roll of Black Lives Matter during the summer, they replaced it with what happened in the Capitol, and everyone's freaking out about that video. I mean, obviously it's doctored, obviously it's faked, but we have to understand, a lot of the bigger kind of mainstream media institutions have kind of led this kind of foundation, this groundwork that it's okay to use violence for political means.
As long as it's your political means.
Exactly.
That's the important part.
Vox literally had an article that said riots are destructive, dangerous, and scary, but can lead to serious political reform.
This is what people are, people. Yes. I got an email from someone saying, Tim, you're wrong about violence. And they were like, look at all these things throughout history where violence has brought change. And I'm like, bro, that was 400 years ago. There was no mass media, there was no mass communication. And so, yes, one day somebody was leaving their farm and went to town hall and saw a different flag there and went, what happened? And they were like, oh, he's in charge now. And they're like, oh.
But we have to understand, BLM had the support of the establishment of the mainstream media, of attorney generals that literally let off a lot of people. Trump supporters don't have any of that. So that's why this was a big miscalculation. This was a big misstep. And I think this was just a fervent crowd just getting the best of it all.
Here's the question, though, is that do you think the conservative media's reaction has been similar to what, quote-unquote, liberal media's reaction was to the BLM riots?
It's always like, well... I don't know specifically, but I will say conservatives, especially like Ben Shapiro, will immediately come out and condemn on principle things.
Yep.
Yeah, like if the violence is wrong, if the left does it, if the right
At
does
every
it,
level,
the
yeah.
left doesn't do that though.
There's right wingers detesting everything that happened yesterday. Fox News, as it was happening, had the head guy of CPAC on talking about how it was justifiable to assassinate and kill an unarmed woman who he thought at the time was a teenager.
Was that Matt Schlapp? Who's on there?
Yeah.
Matt Schlapp was literally so Fox News already was saying this is disgusting, this is horrible, this is bad. People deserve to die when they were shot unarmed by the cops. That's the messaging that was coming out on Fox. A lot different than, of course, MSNBC saying, "Oh, this protest is mainly peaceful. Everything is mainly."
There's a police station on fire behind the guy, and he goes, "Now I know there's a fire, but it's mostly peaceful."
And now these same people are lecturing us about how everyone who was there, whether innocent or not, whether bad or not, whether doing something illegal or not, deserves to be sent to jail for the maximum amount of time. We deserve to lose our civil liberties. We deserve to lose our speech because this happened. And this is bad and this is horrible because violence should be detested at all costs. Meanwhile, they were cheering it on just a few weeks ago.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.